Meeting number 19 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, pursuant to Standing Order 108-2 and the motion adopted by the committee on October 24th, 2020, the committee is resuming its study on processing capacity. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using Zoom application. Proceedings were made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the website will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted.
To ensure that the meeting goes smoothly, I would like to repeat certain rules. MPs and witnesses can speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen between floor English or French. With the latest Zoom version, you can now speak in the language of your choosing without having to choose the right language. You will see that there is a hand raised function if you wish to speak or to speak to the chair. If this option does not work for you, I suggest that MPs and witnesses that want to intervene, please switch on their camera and physically raise their hand. When you do not have the floor, please put your microphone on mute.
I want to remind the committee that recommendations for the processing capacity report are due February 26th at 5 p.m. and must be sent to the clerk. And with that, I'd like to welcome our witnesses for this afternoon. We have from the Canadian Cattlemen Association, Mr. Bob Lowe, President. Welcome, Mr. Lowe. And also Mr. Dennis Laycraft, Executive Vice President. Welcome, Mr. Laycraft. Also from Novalet, nous avons
Élise Gosselin.
Bienvenue, Madame Gosselin. And from Maple Leaf Food Incorporated, we have Nadia B. Theodore, Senior Vice President, Global Government and Industry Relations. Welcome to our committee, Madame Theodore. So with that, we will start with opening statement by the witness, and I'll proceed with the order that I have them in front of me. So from the Canadian Cattlemen Association, whoever wants to take the floor, or you can split your time. You have up to 7.5 minutes to do your statement. So you can start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. My name is Bob Lowe, and I'm a rancher in Alberta and also the president of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, the national voice of Canada's beef farmers and ranchers. With me is Dennis Laycraft, the executive vice president with the CCA. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee to discuss beef processing capacity. The beef industry is Canada's largest agricultural sector, contributing $9 billion in farm cash receipts and $17 billion to the Canadian GDP, while generating over 225,000 jobs. It supports strong rural communities and is the largest Canadian conserver of the Great Northern Plains. The sector's contributions to Canada's economy and environment would not be possible without the ability to process our product for national and international customers. Today, we will talk about what is needed to optimize beef processing capacity. It is not a black and white issue of having too much or too little, but rather we need to attain the right mix of size and scale of processors within Canada. Large processors are efficient competitors nationally and internationally. They allow Canada to take advantage of trade agreements, while small to medium-sized packers allow for slaughter capacity for local food systems. Over the last number of years, the beef industry has been challenged with maintaining small to medium-sized packers and having sufficient processing capacity in Eastern Canada. During the pandemic, our sector demonstrated great resiliency, but vulnerabilities were identified. If we look at Eastern Canada, which includes Ontario, Quebec, and the Atlantic provinces, packing capacity was approaching full capacity prior to the pandemic, and the sector seasonally experienced long delivery times to get cattle to market. This resulted in longer feeding periods, increased costs, and lower prices for producers. We refer to a processing plant's capacity as its utilization rate. And to meet demand surges in 2020, Eastern packers pushed utilization rates in March through June to above 100% by using Saturday shifts. While we are lucky these operations were able to push past 100%, this is not sustainable as they require time for regular plant maintenance. When the Cargill plant shut down in December, a backlog of 10 to 15,000 head of cattle was created. The set-aside program under Agri-Recovery has helped bring stability to the market. However, the backlog head of cattle remains, as it is difficulty to increase capacity beyond the 100%, further demonstrating the precariousness of 100% utilization rates. Overall, limitations in packing capacity have had a significant financial impact for Eastern Canada's beef industry. It is estimated the Ontario feeding sector has experienced cash losses of $238 per head in 2020. Over the past 5 years, the majority of Canada's total beef processing has taken place in Western Canada. In the spring of 2020, temporary slowdowns effectively halted 70% of Canadian beef processing capacity over a 2-week period and resulted in a backlog of approximately 130,000 head of cattle in Western Canada. The resulting feedlot losses were a total of $152 million between mid-March and mid-June. Western processing plants have had an impressive recovery and have efficiently processed the backlog, which was possible due to available capacity. While cattle producers suffered significant profit losses from low market prices and high input costs associated with managing their cattle supply, the set-aside program helped stabilize the market and avoid even greater losses. Now that I've provided some context, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dennis Laycraft, to speak to our recommendations. Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and thanks to the committee for the invitation to appear. Back in 2018, actually, we'd recommended the creation of a Canadian Red Meat Industry Export Development Fund, which looked at trying to increase capacity with particular focus on Eastern Canada, especially cooler capacity, some modifications on the processing line, and as well setting us up to be able to take advantage of a number of these trade agreements that require specialized processing to meet those specific requirements. A second area that we want to talk about is harmonizing our procedures with the US and Canada and with South Korea. Right now, there is a specific clause in our agreement with Korea that would lead to the suspension of our shipments till an investigation is completed. Right now, that's causing a number of plants in the US to not process Canadian cattle, or if they do, they're doing it only on a segregated basis. And the US access to US is really important for competitive pricing in our industry. Bob mentioned the set-aside program, and we're asking that it be extended. We're not through the whole COVID situation yet, and we don't know what's going to happen for the rest of this year until we get up to where, hopefully all Canadians or most Canadians are vaccinated. But having that tool in place worked very well last summer, and being able to work with it very quickly is really important. Then a couple comments about our regulatory system. Right now, the procedures in Canada on our specified risk material related to BSE are different than the US, and it creates a competitive disadvantage. And it actually led to the closure of a number of small or medium-sized plants that just weren't competitive with the different environments. We're looking at trying and are working with the agency to walk through a review of that, and hopefully we'll complete that as soon as possible. And finally, I have to talk about labor. It's hard to talk about expansion when you're having trouble getting enough employees for your current size. So the more we're able to bring in individuals who want to work in those plants, and these are all union jobs across Canada in our industry, and we're again quite often depending on foreign workers to fill vacancies in that. Automation is something we're supporting, and it is part of the solution, but there's no replacement for a highly skilled meat professional when it comes to cutting all of these different specifications for market. And finally, I just, again, because as you've seen the risks and, the packing industry in North America, the meat processing has spent $1.5 billion since last January for putting in place protection for their employees, but certainly placing a vaccination priority on agri-food processing workers, we feel would be very important moving forward. So with that, I'll conclude our remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laycraft. And now we'll go avec nos valets. Madame Gosselin, allez-y jusqu'à 7 minutes et demie. Vous avez le plancher.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity that you're offering me to bring a bit of information to the committee. I'd like to deal with the processing capacity in the dairy area. I'll take this from an innovation and point of view. In order to develop the number of enterprises, for example, industrial and others, for dairy processing in Canada in particular, is composed of PMEs, small and medium industries. And we don't have the research dollars to support the research activities in terms of market. Innovation is essential to our processing capacity. There's a constant effort to respond to the demands of the market and, of course, to respect the regulatory framework and competitive elements. Another element, of course, is the environmental concerns and climate change. Some of our social concerns, of course, because this week, for example, as you might have read in the media, how it's very important that the dairy sector can be what we feed our cattle, for example. This is of great concern because most consumers now are looking for a very high quality product, and they also very concerned about the health and welfare of animals. The context is constantly changing, and we have to constantly adapt our products and our procedures, processes, in order to meet the needs of the environment. For small and medium businesses, most suppliers of the engineering elements that support innovation and research, whether it's for farm machinery, milking machines, or whatever, doesn't cover all our needs. I'd like to talk a little bit about our organization, Nos Valets. It's one of the sectors that Quebec is very proud about. It's established 25 years ago. Producers and processors got together to create a fund, a common fund to ensure research. Not only did they create a research fund, but they did it together, both producers and processors. And in other sectors of agro-food production, beef, for example, which, of course, the cattlemen, of course, have just talked about, they have a certain fee that they pay on the carcass for research purposes. So anyway, we got together to invest in research. So Nos Valets, all farm enterprises in Quebec, and all producers that handle and deal with processing of milk, whether it's cheese factories, artisanal cheeses, or small family farms, contribute. We're working together to get solutions to the dairy plants. Since its inception, Nos Valets has invested $16.6 million in over 125 projects for the total value of $54.5 million. And this was provided by producers and processors together. It's often said that we're less innovative in the sector, or it's a perception at least, in the agri-food field or sector, compared to others sectors of manufacturing, according to ICED. But the dairy sector in Quebec has a very high score for innovation. When we were created in 1995, the industry was facing major challenges in diversifying its dairy products. at that time in '95, we had a picture that was based basically on an increasing demand for butterfat. Now, since then, there's been quite a bit of change in the demand. We've also created a number of diversified products, but over 25 years, people are fat is a bad word, so. They want to see it transformed into butter or cheese or another product, but they want to drink their skim milk. We've also noted, not only in Quebec, but not only in Canada, but throughout the world, milk has a certain amount of fractions or components that are protein. And we're trying to optimize the use of that and make it fit the requests of the market. So we have to find the right balance. We have to try to use as much of our butter fat, butter oil in Canada, but there are still a lot of remaining components which are non-fat solids. So we have products such as either skim milk or we have permeates, components, fractions of milk that can be used and should be value added. One example, and you'll find the same problem everywhere in the United States or in Europe, but in Canada, because of our free trade agreements and international agreements of that nature, dairy product processors have had to modify what they produce because they don't have an outlet for some of these. Skim milk is in abundance, for example. So what I'd like to speak about today is to indicate that insofar as innovation goes, we are really searching quite diligently to find solutions. We're looking at the fractions and solid concentrates of the milk product. We're trying to make it fit with the needs of the industry, what to do with the skim milk, the whey, and we are handling better the processes to reset the balance between non-fat solids and the other components of milk. We are finding solutions, and the aspect that you must take into consideration right now, in order to deal with processing of milk and milk process, all our capacity, increasing capacity will allow us to process a greater number and variety of products, which of course is going to optimize the use of the whole of the milk. So we do have projects and experiments underway. What we're looking at for the future is that research and innovation is part of our priorities, of course, for the following. Anyway, I'll finish on that. Thank you. Madame Gosselin. And next time, if you can perhaps put the microphone just a little bit above your upper lip.
That the translator, it affects the quality of the sound. So, alors merci bien. We'll go to our next presenter, Ms. Nadia B. Theodore from Maple Leaf. So you have up to 7.5 minutes. Go ahead, Madame Theodore.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Bon après-midi à tous et à...
Good afternoon, everyone.
I am here representing Maple Leaf Foods, the largest food processing company in Canada, with operations across Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Quebec, and Ontario, and an exporting footprint that includes Asia, the United States, and Europe. We are truly, as a company, Canadian-born and globally grown. We are committed and invested to the success and sustained growth of the Canadian agri-food sector and the processing sector in particular, which we believe will be key to Canada's post-COVID-19 economic recovery. But the question, of course, today that we're trying to grapple with is how do we make this happen? What will it take to make economic recovery happen? I would like to highlight 3 areas that Maple Leaf Food believes will be critical to success. First, regulatory agility. We know that if done correctly, regulation can have a positive impact on growth and foster a thriving competitive market that supports innovation and technological progress. However, if executed poorly, regulation stifles productivity, results in unnecessary costs for all businesses, but in particular for small and medium-sized firms, and effectively reverses our competitiveness gains. The good news is that Canada's regulatory system gives Canadians and our country's trading partners confidence that products made in Canada meet the highest health, safety, environmental, and quality requirements. The bad news, however, is that our regulatory system is complex with a multi-layered jurisdictional structure with no clear authority. Perhaps more troubling to us is that many regulations are either outdated or focused too heavily on prescribing a process than ensuring an outcome. This deters innovation and solutions that would improve health, safety, and environmental outcomes, and stymies much needed investment to our country. The ultimate result, additional cost, distrust between industry and regulators, and an overall less than efficient system that prevents us from living up to our true potential on both health and safety and global competitiveness. Now, with the emergence of COVID-19, the Canadian government has shown agility is possible in the regulatory process within the agri-food sector. And we sincerely hope that the government continues to prioritize regulatory flexibility over the long term. In this regard, the recommendation out of the 2018 Agri-Food Economic Strategy Table for an approach that is focused on predictability, efficiency, and effectiveness, and equally importantly, considers the cumulative impact of regulation on competitiveness and net economic benefit to Canada should be further explored. The second area that other colleagues have already mentioned today that I would like to also highlight is talent. Like any industry, ours requires an adequate workforce to keep operations going. The sector continues to identify chronic and critical labor shortages as one of the most pressing risks and a major constraint on both agricultural growth and global competitiveness. Right now, the sector is in need of 30,000 workers, 10% of our workforce. By 2025, we expect that number to more than double. Now, this is not a new challenge, and the industry has been sounding the alarm bells for several years. Luckily, coupled with concrete solutions that we are eager to work with all government partners on. Changes to the temporary foreign worker program and to immigration programming are needed to support immediate labor shortages. But even more immediate a need is to help address significant labor challenges that the sector is facing due to COVID-19. Even during a pandemic, Canadians need to eat. It is because of our frontline workers that Canada's food plants continued to operate throughout the pandemic to provide us with food on our tables. Maple Leaf Foods alone has invested over $50 million to keep our workers safe, to allow them to do so. It is critical that governments also reinforce that our frontline workers are critical and the importance that their contributions to keeping our food supply safe. We sincerely hope that the federal government will work with provinces to ensure that food processing plant workers are prioritized for COVID-19 vaccines immediately after critical healthcare workers in all provinces and territories. This is in line with the direction provided by the National Advisory Committee on Immunization and with what other countries around the globe, including our competitors, are doing. As we have seen recently, there is also a serious animal care consideration to sustained labor shortages. In particular, in the pork industry, the supply chain is very tightly calibrated. If there is a break in the hog supply chain, it certainly does not take long for things to get very serious on the farms. We have seen this just this week. To solve for longer-term labor problems, the recommendations of the Agri-Food Economic Strategy provide a good roadmap. Assess future needs for all skill levels, develop a sector-specific strategy for skills development that includes a focus on apprenticeship and skilled trades needs, and promote the sector as a good career choice. Before I close, I would like to touch on the topic of innovation. The global agri-food market in 2025 will be highly competitive and filled with new challenges: a growing population, climate change, and rapid advances in technology, just to name a few. Maple Leaf Foods strives for continuous evolution of our products and business strategies to meet these challenges head on. In 2019, we became the first major food company in the world to be carbon neutral, and the only food company in Canada to set science-based emission reduction targets. Existing federal innovation programs are not well suited for food manufacturing. Often, they are premised on job creation or on the development of disruptive technologies. And in a small market like Canada, it is unrealistic to think that all or even most innovation will be disruptive. Our industry will benefit from adopting technologies that already exist in other countries or industries, and in so doing, introduce and customize innovation products and processes within our sector. Innovation will be critical to ensure the stability and growth of the sector, and more can be done to tailor the programs. I'd like to thank you again for having me and look forward to your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ms. Theodore. Right on time. Thank you for taking the time. So we'll now go to our question round, and we'll start with a 6-minute round. Ms. Rood, for 6 minutes, you've got the floor. Go ahead, Ms. Rood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for appearing today. You've got some great suggestions, and there's a lot of obviously issues that we have across industry with processing. Mr. Lowe, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned that you have a cow, calf, and feedlot operations in Alberta, and I if I recall, and maybe I read it somewhere, you also have an operation maybe in Manitoba. So, am I correct in that, or?
Yeah, you're correct in that.
Okay, so I guess you can speak from some personal experience then about a couple of regions in Canada. And so in more than one committee meeting, I just wanted to say we've heard how the pandemic has affected processing capacity. And you'd mentioned this in your opening remarks and as well in your brief. So I'm wondering if you could comment on how the federal government's pandemic funding or other funding has helped or not helped so far, specifically with beef.
There was some money, and I don't remember the exact numbers. Dennis might remember them better than me, but some money was put forward towards the packers to help them with resiliency, with coming around after the Cargill thing in Alberta. Now there's, you heard Dennis say that the packers in North America spent $1.5 billion in keeping their workers safe. That's a substantial amount of money that they did by themselves to make sure the system kept going. The federal government, nobody's got any money. They put in, I talked to Minister Bibeau a lot, and I think they did as good as they could given the circumstances. We kept rolling. The set-aside program was really good, and I'm not afraid to say if it sat on the shelf so that it could be made available when needed, it was, the only problem with it was 60 days too late. We'd built up 130,000 head, and that takes a long time to get through. And at that point in time, when you've got cattle you don't just get to put them on the shelf. They keep getting bigger, and they eventually will succumb to old age if you don't. It's not as bad as the pork industry, but you can't keep cattle alive forever.
Sure. So if I can just interrupt here, in speaking with that and keeping along those lines, your brief also mentioned concerns about pressures on smaller and medium-sized processors and the reduced number of these. So do you have any thoughts on how this could be rectified? Because as you just mentioned, the cattle kept getting, bigger and bigger. Would a large number of smaller processors give some flexibility to producers on capacity when the big processors are shut down or have reduced capacity?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points there. The smaller packers wouldn't have the financial ability to put into place as fast as the big packers did. On the other hand, if we had more, small and medium-sized federally inspected plants, which I think is a major detriment to these small plants, is the cost of being federally inspected. the stuff you have to put in to qualify for a federally inspected plant, it makes a smaller plant. It makes it pretty tough for them to compete. And somehow, a provincially inspected plant is good, and they were full. We were booking cattle out in provincial plants out 6 or 8 months. We need, if we could have more smaller federal plants. How that works, I've got no idea, because if it was a long-term profitable statement, the bigger plants or somebody would have come up to the table and done it. But we need, as Dennis says quite often, surge capacity, which is we lack for various reasons. Whether it's regulations or what it is, I don't know. The other thing is chicken and eggs and scenario. If the packers come, will the beef industry expand to do it? And lack of packing capacity is one of the reasons that the beef industry has been stagnant for 15 years, probably. So which comes first?
Great. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure how much time I have left. I know we're getting close.
So about a minute, 20 seconds.
Okay, great. Thank you. Both Ms. Theodore and Mr. Lowe, you both mentioned there are some labor issues and shortages and trying to attract people and having to work with temporary foreign workers. And I'm wondering if either of you want to comment if either of your industry is doing anything to recruit labor from the Canadian labor pool, because obviously it's skilled labor that's required for meat cutting. So I'm just wondering, is there recruitment going on to try and find or entice folks to get into the meat cutting industry?
I'm happy to jump in here. I'd say to answer your question directly, yes, recruiting is ongoing. And of course, meat cutting is but one of the skilled labor requirements that we need at Maple Leaf Foods. Like I said in my interventions, this is definitely not a new issue for the industry. It's one that has been going on for several years now. And so recruitment efforts absolutely are ongoing. But if I may, the issue is broader than an immediate kind of recruitment effort to bring people in the immediate, right? It's really about a plan that needs to be put in place to really understand what the immediate, medium term, and long term gaps are in our skilled labor.
Thank you, Ms. Theodore. Sorry that the time is up for this question, but you might have a chance to continue. So our next question goes to Lynn Bessette for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Bessette. Thank you, Ms. Rood.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses that are here today. I will be asking questions to Ms. Gosselin from Novalet. Your speech was very interesting. The work that's being done by Novalet. Can you tell us more about the way that the research is implemented by dairy processors? Do you have any examples? Yes, so we want to make sure that the research we conduct is not just done for science and to publish in peer-reviewed journals, but also to help businesses. The first step is to establish research priorities that are established regarding the leadership. And so they tell us what they want us to focus our research on. So if we ask the right questions from the get-go, we are more likely to obtain the right responses. There is then an oversight of this research by processors, and the Novalet funds are funds for everyone, so we want to make proof of concepts, and then businesses will implement new processes. The best proof is that we've been doing this work for 25 years and the funding is renewed every year. So if we were irrelevant, if our projects were irrelevant and were not useful, it wouldn't work, we wouldn't get funding. I would also like to confirm that we trained about 400 people, master's level, the PhD level in universities, and these people now work in plants and in organizations. So that's a very important part of it. You also mentioned eco products like skim milk. So the committee heard about this a few weeks ago. What solutions is Novale exploring to solve this problem, and can the government play a role? So we're trying different things, and we're really looking at it through two lenses. We want to help every business who has too much solid non-fats products, a surplus of them. We are looking at what's being done in other plants around the world. We're doing trial and error kind of thing. We want to validate processes within research centers and universities. We are working for solutions to create energy, to have short circuits for packing, that we could use, for example, eco-residue to create this packaging. And so we really want to give tools to each business so that they have a whole toolbox of technologies to pick from to help their business. Individual solutions don't always solve global problems, so we're looking at this through another lens to see if we could, for example, process volumes that are higher, like green energies or green chemistry. That's very interesting, but would go beyond the scope of one business. So that's the interesting work that we can do with our partners. You spoke of the customers who want eco-friendly products, organic products. Can businesses meet this demand, or are there still some challenges? So we have a project right now that tries to identify what customers mean when they speak of natural products. Just asking that question means that we get very complex answers. So there's bread and meat and milk, and we're really asking consumers the question, and to weed through that helps us to have certain ideas of which path to follow. But customers' perceptions evolve, and we really have to study this long term. So we're trying to reduce the clean labels, so conservation agents, for example. So processing businesses are very active in this regard. We try to find other processes that can improve the conservation of produce and foods with more natural alternatives rather than using chemicals. Committee heard a lot about labor shortages in the processing industry. Automation could be a solution. What future does automation and robotization hold in this sector, and does your research focus on this? Yes, so I think people who deal with equipment will be the leaders in this field, on this file. But with automation means that producers and processors have more time for other things, like management and analysis, business analysis. Thank you, Madame Gosselin, Madame Bissette. Mr. Perron, you have 6 minutes. Thank you to all witnesses for being here today. Ms. Gosselin, I would like to pursue the line of questioning that my colleagues started. Many witnesses told us about labor shortages, the need for innovation, for technology, for the improvement of processes, and witnesses also said there was a lack of funding in food processing in Canada in general. So Novale seems to be a model that we would maybe like to emulate elsewhere. You've existed for 25 years. So what are your limits and what are your needs, this committee can help you by writing up recommendations. So I would like to hear more about your constraints. So at Novalet, when we say we want to invest in research and that we're investing depending on the needs of the industry, what's important for us is to leverage that money. We want to be surrounded by financial partners, be they provincial or federal, so that they may play their supportive role towards the sector so that they can help foster innovation. We're at the first step right now, the first step of the process, so we're more focused on research. But once that first step is over, we will need funds to help businesses. Wait times are longer for programs, for example. And we know that there's some uncertainty regarding the government's ability to continue funding as it did in the past. Post-COVID, we have to be able to help businesses to be able to support the dairy sector and its desire to invest in innovation. And then once we finish part of the research and that we propose solutions, the business still has a lot of work to do to develop new products or new processes. And so investing in businesses would allow them to do that. We're not only speaking of researchers in universities, but it would be great if a business had an idea, an innovative idea, and then they need to make that a reality, and that means that they will need funding to acquire new equipment, etc. And so it's important that this funding be available to support the initiative of these businesses. Some of our stakeholders are Agri-Food, Saputo, Parmalat, and what they're saying is that there is a need there for higher investment for innovation. So would that take the form of a tax credit, for example? Yes, tax credits are one thing, but I think it's more about sharing risk, especially when we're putting forth a new project or a new product for the first time. So I think tax credits are part of the solution, mostly for SMEs. I think it's more important for them than for big businesses because the amount would mean more to an SME. But there needs to be a funding system in place, be it grants or accessing capital or accessing funding to make sure that businesses have access to funding. Even if it's a loan, for example, businesses need to have access to more capital. You also spoke of long waiting times. Would there be something to do to solve that issue? So we're working with the National Council in Science and Engineering that finances research here in Canada. And we were glad to see that they opened the scope of certain programs that were very interesting. What we realized, though, is that the waiting time between the tabling of a project and obtaining an answer went from a 2-3 month wait period to a year. So these programs are popular. That means that businesses are innovating. However, I'm not sure that these programs can deal with the higher sign-up numbers. We can't wait years for things to change. Timing is of the essence. So accelerating the help that's offered to these businesses, I got you. So you spoke of people that you trained. That's very interesting. Could you tell us more about this? So for Novalet projects, these are students at the undergrad, graduate, and PhD level. These students were maybe thinking of working in technology field or elsewhere, but they found a stimulating research project and now decide to work in processing. So they can be at the head of processing plants in higher up positions, but they're also in the public sector, at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency or elsewhere. Thank you. Thank you, Monsieur Perron.
For 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for coming today and contributing to our study on processing capacity here in Canada. I think I'll start my first question with the Canadian cattlemen. Mr. Laycroft, you were talking about automation, and I can remember when our committee in the previous parliament in 2018, we did a cross-country trip, and one of our stops was in Guelph, where we visited the major Cargill plant there. And as you correctly noted, a lot of the jobs involved in that plant are, you need a lot of talent. It's a lot of skill, and there's a lot of stuff that, you need human hands for that a machine just simply can't do. So, for our committee's benefit, when you're talking about automation, can you list some specific examples where you'd like to see that investment? What kind of jobs you'd like to see that move into?
Yeah, there are a few interesting ones. If you look, some people have put in automated box storage facilities, which normally you'd be using, forklifts and that, and moving it around. It's all set up on conveyors, and they actually have the capacity to mix and match orders in a very sophisticated way as you're selling it around the world. So it isn't always on the processing line where the automation is going to occur. It's throughout the entire system. And we're using some remote vision technology where it can be third-party monitored, for instance. And we're working with the CFIA on kind of the future of that as well. So there's a lot of different ways that maybe just don't fit the, your traditional mindset of what it should look like.
Great. Thank you so much for that. My next question, I'll turn to Ms. Theodore of Maple Leaf Foods. In one of our previous meetings, we had a representative from UFCW appear before the committee, and he was talking about there used to be the sector council program that existed that brought stakeholders in a tripartite arrangement. So you had industry, labor, and government, and that specific forum allowed those three groups to tackle issues like labor availability. I mean, you talked about the 30,000 workers that we're short now and the fact that the problem is going to get worse. From UFCW's perspective, like, they would like to see more effort put into place seeking homegrown talent to fill these sectors. Do you think something like if we reinstated like the sector council program or had some kind of a forum where industry, labor, and government could regularly meet to deal specifically with the labor issue would be helpful? Any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think that, the point about collaboration across the different stakeholders invested in a solution is important. And, absolutely, will that help? Absolutely, it will help. What I would say, and not to be a Debbie Downer, frankly, honestly, because I do think that, collaboration across the stakeholders and looking for home-based talent is important. And certainly from a Maple Leaf Foods perspective, when we bring talent, from other countries, we do it with a view to having permanent labor at our plants, right? So I think that we can, from a Maple Leaf Foods perspective, bringing in talented, soon-to-be Canadians is something that is kind of at the base of what we do when we're looking for talent, whether we're bringing them from outside of Canada or looking for people who are already here. What is important to note, however, is that the temporary foreign worker program, it was developed in the 1970s to respond to labor shortages, right? Mm. And the issue has only gotten more pronounced in those years, right? And so, that was the point that I was trying to get across previously, that absolutely can we do more to work together here in Canada across the different stakeholders to try and attract talent that is already here. I am a firm believer that we need to be reaching out not just to elementary schools and high schools and technical schools to sort of make sure that people understand what types of jobs are available in the sector, that it's actually a very cross-sectional, cross-functional type jobs, good paying, stable jobs, 100%. But we also need to be reaching out to their parents and their grandparents, right? So that people around the dinner table are having conversations not just about being lawyers and doctors and dentists, but about working in our agri-food sector, right? So absolutely, those conversations and those collaborations are part of the long-term solution. But I would be remiss if I were to say that in order to, at least in the short term, if we do it right, then longer term, we've got it covered. We've got a plan, we're coordinated, we've got a national strategy, we're working at the federal level and across provinces and territories, we're cooking with gas for sure. It doesn't stop the short-term problem that is immediate, that has been more pronounced with COVID-19, and that we will need to deal with in the shorter term if we are going to see our economic recovery post-COVID-19 really take root and really provide us, Canada, with the competitive advantage that we need to get ahead of recovery, right? To get out front in recovery.
Thank you, Ms. Theodore. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. And now we'll go to 5-minute rounds with Mr. Steinley for 5 minutes. Ms. Steinley, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And first off, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish everyone a happy Canada Ag Day. We're proud of all our producers. So I want to start off by thanking everyone for being here and thanking agriculture producers across the country. I'm going to start with the CCA. Bob, Dennis, good to see you again. One thing you talked about is, the government did the best they could. And I know when I was a kid and my dad said I did the best I could, it wasn't a ringing endorsement of the work I did, either fencing or on the farm. So with that being said, this government generally doesn't act until they have to, until it reaches the crisis point. You've talked about the set-aside program. Have you had conversations with the minister about the set-aside program, and where is that at right about now?
I guess I'll step in, Bob. We are having direct conversations about extending that, and sort of the message we're hearing is that until the COVID crisis is over, that will continue forward. When that announcement was made last May, I think it was $252 million, and 125 went towards the set-aside type of activities for pork and beef sectors. It was indicated that if more money was needed when that was used up, it could be made available. So it's kind of left it open-ended, but that's the status of where we're at there. The money that was spent on helping on the processing side was $77.5 million. Mm-hmm. And obviously when you have a large processing industry and one company here today spent $50 million, that'll give you an idea of, the amount that is, yeah.
So I'm hoping there is a sense that money will be there if we're still in the throes in COVID here in the summer and spring for producers. Another thing I hear from producers across the country is burdensome regulations. One would be the SRM, so that's specific risk material, and I think it's burdensome to both producers and processors alike. Have you had conversations with the government at this point in time, and are there options on the table to now review some of these archaic regulations that are left from the BSE days and making sure we can remove them so there's less red tape for our producers and processors?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to give you an idea of the disparity in the U.S. on over 30-month animals, in Canada, we remove over 50 kilograms of this material. In the U.S., they remove 1 kilogram. So that's just how wide a competitive disparity there is there. We've set up and are working with the agency on an expert working group right now. So we're assembling that group, and we're going to really dig into this issue, hopefully over the next 4 or 5 months. And hopefully by late summer, we'll have some more recommendations ready on it.
Thank you very much. And my friend, Mr. Blois, I usually ask this question, and in your opinion from the CCA, what would be a couple of the regulations that are still in place, regulation, taxes that are hurting producers and processors' bottom line that we could get rid of and scrap and make livelihoods more productive for both producers and processors and expand processing capacity in our country?
You know, I sometimes I'm not even sure it's the regulation, it's the policy manual and the actual resources that are made available to do it. For instance, we've been working on trying to get improved certification procedures, get more cattle eligible to go to Europe. And we've been having those conversations for between 24 and 30 months now, trying to get improved procedures in place. You look at countries like the US where they have their agriculture marketing service, they had that ready in months. So being able to take a look at these newer, this variety of certification procedures, we need to have first of all, the resources available in government to be working with other governments. And then secondly, do it at the speed of commerce. We have competitors that aren't going to wait for us. They're going to take that lunch from us.
Yeah. So I do hear a lot about the disparity between provincial and federal inspection agencies and how there needs to be some more communication between those two agencies. Is that a place where we definitely need to work on to increase opportunities for growing our capacity in processing sector in Canada?
You know, I think it's all of the above. You know, there are things, the large plants are really absolutely vital to satisfy world demand. I mean, if you're trying to sell into Costco, Japan, you need a pretty sizable operation just to meet their weekly requirements.
Thank you,
if you're looking
Mr. Laycroft.
Sorry
about that. That's fine. Thank you. Time has run out. So now we'll move. Thank you, Mr. Steinley. Monsieur Drouin, pour 5 minutes. Allez-y, Monsieur Drouin.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I would like to thank all of our witnesses who are appearing today. Might I begin with Madame Gosselin? I know that Novolet, your group, is doing a lot of research in the dairy area, of course. When I'm talking with someone, either a cheesemaker or you mentioned milk proteins and dryers, for example, that is required to de-wet the product. We know that we need to do a lot of updating in our systems, for example. What approach should we be adopting to help this sector transform itself and get more modern? I think you're muted, madam. Well, thank you for your question. There's a lot of processing capacity in a number of things. You mentioned dryers, for example. Long story short, when we manufacture butter, we have skim milk and we have buttermilk. Very, very often, they're not really converted. They're just, the skim milk, for example, is just dried. It's a powder, and that's it. So it's skim milk powder. Butter is quite popular, right? Once again. But we have a product here where what are we going to do with the buttermilk? Or the whey? So dryers are an important factor. When we talk about investment, these are some very massive investments for smaller enterprises to upgrade their technology and to do something better than just plain skim milk powder, which often has to be colored purple and fed to cattle right back to them. So it's got to be better value added. So we're looking for alternatives which have the highest value added, as our competitors are doing abroad. Creating isolates of milk and to extract protein and to make very high priced and very high value ingredients. Now, to support the industrial sector, to take the steps to arrive at a certain stability in the resourcing financially of these programs. From your perspective, is it a matter of intellectual property, perhaps, or copyrights that we cannot create these products here in Canada? I know that there are some obstacles, trade obstacles to some items, but in Europe, they seem to be able to create these new products and no problem at all. Is it IP that's at heart here? Well, a lot of processors in the dairy sector here in Canada, among our big guys, we're in the top 20 internationally, worldwide. It's not a matter of not being able to do it or proceeding or going ahead. It's more the financial environment that is the constraint or you have to have a certain scale, a certain volume in order to invest massively in the machinery and devices and procedures for these products. It's an economic issue, plain and simple. And we have to perhaps look at solutions that are other than what our competitors are using, although we could just imitate them, of course. Okay, thank you very much for those answers. Mr. Lowe.
Your opening remarks, and I know that you'd proposed. I know your organization was strong on set aside programs, but in your overall observations and what you've seen over the past almost 12 months now, we know that your members who are selling into a market that and processors that we know now are somewhat vulnerable to COVID-19, but to any potential outbreaks within the industry. And we know that one industry, and I can cite the Alberta example. Obviously, it's been in the news. What suggestion do you have for a committee?
So on that, I'll have. Unfortunately, we're past the deadline, and you may be able to answer it some other time, Mr.
There's
Lowe.
no such thing as a 5-minute conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Drouin. Thank you, Mr. Lowe. And et maintenant, Monsieur Perron, 2 minutes et demie. So that's even half of it. So, vas-y, Monsieur Perron.
Mr. Lowe, you mentioned the Emergency Processing Fund and the fact that this fund was insufficient. You would like to see more funding there. You also spoke of standards. There's the ESB standard for one of the diseases touching beef. What do you think of this issue? Mr. Lowe or Mr. Laycroft can answer the question.
With what the members is mentioning, so I'll turn it over to Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I'm not sure if I know what the EFB, and that may be in the translation that's getting lost there.
Vous avez pas eu la traduction? Est-ce qu'on peut?
Yes, so did you hear interpretation? Do you hear interpretation? Yes. Some former witnesses spoke of reglementation, so the ESB standard, ESB. So I would like to know what you think of this topic. Would that allow you to be more competitive with the U.S., for example?
Yeah, I think we're talking about the BSE requirements, and certainly when you look at the cost of processing, especially in the specialized plants that we've lost that dealt with the over 30-month-older mature animals, clearly there's a huge advantage to U.S. processors versus the smaller processors in Canada. Right now we have an application in for negligible risk, which we're waiting to see the response to that. But the interesting thing with BSE is they even quit producing reporting numbers all the way back in 2016 because there are so few numbers reported anywhere in the world. And since 2016, there's only been 2 cases reported on the entire planet. So, that's the old rules that are out there. Hopefully we're able to move past those. And I mentioned the volumes earlier. When you see just this huge volume that has to be taken in and put into a contained disposal or destruction procedure, where in the US, that's going into a whole range of other uses, including fertilizer.
Thank you.
So narrowing that would help.
Thank you, Mr. Legraf. Merci, Monsieur Perron.
Et donc, je comprends que...
on
on
a
a arrêté le temps, monsieur.
Sir, we stopped the clock, didn't we? Mr. Perron, I added about 15 seconds to your time.
McGregor, you have 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the Canadian cattlemen, in your opening remarks, you were referring, Mr. Lowe, to the problems that the beef industry has had in maintaining small to medium-sized packers and so on. And in the last summer in late August, I was invited from the BC cattlemen to come to the South Okanagan region and visit 2 ranches which had won sustainability awards. And of course, we were talking about the stresses that the pandemic had with the backlogs in processing capacity. And I remember the ranchers talking about, how they had to sort of develop a few innovative ways to try and, do their own processing. Do you have any threads or stories that you can share with the committee or on how, because you talked about resiliency that the cattle industry has shown through this, any lessons that can be learned from how that resiliency manifested itself, how they tried to, take what was essentially a very bad deal from the rolling backlog and maybe try to promote a little bit more local food security, get connected a little bit more with local food networks and so on?
Yeah, there's actually an example right at home where I live of a young couple. And you don't hear much about young couples starting out in the cattle industry and making a go of it. But they seem to be doing it. And they've had a farm to plate, or, a private people just come and get their grass-fed beef, actually. They went from about 110 animals a year to over 250 because they had enough of a reputation amongst the little provincial packers that they got at it right off the bat and booked ahead, and they're still actually delivering beef on those deals that they made back probably the first part of April or May. So yeah, and there's some places in Ontario, some people in Ontario that have switched their business plan the same way. Mm-hmm. That's not the bulk of the industry, though. That all helps. Mm-hmm. But the bulk of the industry, in our own particular case, we ended up shipping beef to small plants in Idaho.
Yeah.
Because we couldn't get them anywhere else. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks. That's about my time.
Yeah. Sorry, my mute wasn't on, so I'm sorry that I kind of interrupted. So yeah, the time's up, and we'll go to the 5-minute round for Mr. Epp. Go ahead, Mr. Epp, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellent testimony from all of you. Thank you very much. I'll begin with Ms. Gosselin and Novate. I want to begin with your funding model, which is something I'm quite familiar with, if I understand correctly, where you're actually having checkups come both from the processing side and from the producing side, and then coming at some agreements around funding models. So my question would go to, with the increased access to the Canadian market through CUSMA, through CPDA, TPP, and the CETA agreements, are you feeling any of that in your funding model, or are you collecting? I think I know the answer to this question. Are you collecting any checkoff on the imports? I think the answer would be no. And if there isn't, please inform us. Has there been any other compensation talked about from the research aspect? I'll have to ask you to go off mute.
Désolée. Oui, c'était.
That's an excellent question. So there's no compensation that is returned to us in funding for Novalet, but what is extracted is stable from the milk is stable, and so milk volumes have increased, but over the last year, these volumes went down quite a bit. And so the income coming from the extraction is diminishing rather than augmenting at the moment. As for loss of parts of the market that were given through these agreements, that doesn't mean that we have more investment in our research.
On the cattle industry to be, free market oriented. Appreciate that. You've called on the setting up of a red meat industry export development fund. What's the advantage of actually having that funded by government as opposed to by checkoff from the industry?
Yeah, I can maybe comment on that if you like, Bob. First of all, it's intended to be a matching fund.
Okay.
So industry would be putting money up. So it's kind of the 50-50 match. And anytime you're kind of building to deal with a surge capacity or almost contingency capacity, it's hard to factor that into a pure business model. But when you have the matching money, it does allow for that additional investment to be there so that when you have the need for some additional capacity, you're not starting from scratch. It's already in existence.
Thank you. That's new information to me of the matching component, so I appreciate that. I've actually presented this information before at committee. Dr. Sarah Lloyd presented a 10-year chart comparing retail pricing along with the pricing paid back to the cattle producer. This is done in American funds, and I know the Speaker in the House would rule me out of order, but I think I can get away with this, maybe not. And the numbers aren't important, but it's basically showing in the middle of that chart around January of 2015 a divergence in what the producer receives relative to the retail pricing of beef. And this is American data. I don't know whether that's applicable across Canada, but my question would be, it happens to align that break with the chart that you provided in your briefing materials right along the Korean FTA. Is that a sheer coincidence? I'm looking at about January of 2015. Is there a relationship between the divergence in those margins and that particular trade agreement? Reminding this is U.S. data, not Canadian data.
I think, Dennis, that the question went a different direction. You better take that.
Yeah, no, there is no relation to the Korean FTA at all. If you were to take a look at 2014, that was probably record high prices in both markets. And interesting, when you get into the utilization argument, when you're trying to get that share, there's kind of a sweet spot in utilization. It's around 92%. When you go above 92% utilization, price producers get usually drops about 1.3%.
Okay.
If you drop below that, it goes up 1.3%. So when you have this capacity that's available and you get more competitive bidding, so that affects the share. And ideally, you want to land in the spot where both processors and producers are making money.
So more capacity in Canada should alleviate some of that divergence, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, and you also want U.S. bidders on our market,
right?
Too. When you bring Tyson in and Agri-Beef, it makes a big difference on pricing.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Maple Leaf Foods, if I may.
Well, we're pretty much, you got 4 seconds.
Retailer code of conduct. Is Maple Leaf Foods big enough to withstand the Harry's from the Big Five?
Thank you for the question, and she may get a chance later to answer it. Thank you. And now we'll go to Mr. Lewis for 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all the panelists. This is very informative, and I very much appreciate your advocacy and your time. I would start with Ms. Theodore. We've heard it a lot in this study. We talk about the needs for skilled labor, and you talking about educating people as to the good paying, the stable jobs that are out there. That and I wanted to know what kind of relationship you have with institutions like I'm in Kitchener-Conestoga, which is really near University of Guelph and Conestoga College. Both have some strong programs. So what relationship do you have with those post-secondary institutions, and what can we as a federal government do to help, for lack of a better word, promote?
Yeah, thank you for that question. we, Maple Leaf Foods, have actually very good relationships with universities across Canada. We have a summer student program across many universities. We have co-op programs. We actually have a Center of Excellence program where you can come into the organization of Maple Leaf Foods and then do, various jobs in various of the different areas in the business to learn about the business, and then decide, where it is that you might like to go. Finally, as you start your permanent career with the company. So when it comes to our relationship with universities, we're doing okay, right? In my humble opinion, the rub comes from, number one, when we're in those universities and we're pitching Maple Leaf Foods, right? Besides the banks and the, name another sector, not to single out the banks, how is it, to me, it's too late by then, right? People have already kind of made up their minds as to what they believe to be high growth, high potential, on the cutting edge of innovation type jobs are. And we know that the future, the workers of tomorrow that are in our universities right now are looking for those types of jobs, right? They're looking to be part of the future of the economic growth of Canada. They're looking to be part of cutting edge innovation, disruptive technology. That is the talent that we want to attract, absolutely. Across all types of jobs at Maple Leaf Foods and across the sector, that we are not doing a good enough job in selling. We're not doing a good enough job of selling that story. Right. And I think that part of it, if just to conclude, part of it goes back to ourselves when we're talking about how we're going to manage the sector going forward and shape the sector going forward, is to make sure that us ourselves in the sector are at the cutting edge of innovation, right? And that the federal government is helping us in doing that, helping Canadian agri-food and agriculture sector be at the cutting edge of innovation in the agriculture space. And that will help us to attract that talent.
Right. Thank you. Boy, I wish you had more time. And I'm going to move to the bee farmers. But Ms. Gosselin, I did want to talk. You mentioned green chemistry, and I talk about biomass, and you want to talk about ways of moving forward quickly. That would be fantastic. But I don't know if I'm going to get time, because I did want to specifically ask. Everybody moved around on my screen. The gentleman from the bee farmers ended up talking about a young couple who went from 110 animals to 250. Now, a lot of our local farmers are in the exact situation, those kind of small producers working with small processors. I know that the big players are going to get support, and we want to help them, but in our own neighborhoods too, we want to help our small producers and small farmers. What kind of things can we do to help that couple that you referred to?
Kind of what I think, and I haven't really had a chance to mention it, but one of the good things that came out of government during COVID was the government's changes to our agri-stability program. Those mean a lot to the cattle industry in particular, at least I guess everybody, but I know the cattle industry. And if, the big thing, the feds have said, here it is, and it's up to the provinces. And if, it's kind of up to the provinces to accept this, that would be one of the major things, I would think.
Okay, there you go. I'm not going to push it with 10 seconds left, Mr. Chair. I would concede my time, but thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And now, et maintenant, Monsieur Lehoux, vous avez...
Mr. Lehoux, you have 6 minutes. Please go ahead. Oh, my turn. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I thank, of course, the witnesses, and I'd like to ask a question of Ms. Gosselin. You spoke of working very hard to develop and innovate new products with these non-fat solids, particularly in protein elements. These products that you're trying to develop, and of course you will ultimately succeed. Will that be for a consumer market here in Canada? Because with the new trade agreement with the Americans, we may have to seek specific authorization for any new products that are under the supply management regime? Yes, well, that's one of the issues, of course. We are limited in what we can export of these products that we're developing. What we do is we find solutions, but we're trying to find those markets for higher value added, obviously. So yes, domestic markets, higher value, or export markets. Now that eliminates perhaps skim milk powder, but it leaves perhaps some of these other concentrates of milk or fractions, components, etc. Some of these other products are going to be open for export. So these higher valued products, I think there's probably, we can also develop other than in the States. Well, I think there are quite a few number of possibilities for exports yet, yes. Processors have been telling us for some time now that these solutions are a high risk from an investment point of view, of course. And they want to be darn sure that if they invest heavily in producing these new innovative products, that they'll have a chance to sell them. Does the federal government currently, because, you know, there was compensation talked about in the negotiations with the Americans when some of our market got eroded, as it were. It's not obvious what the compensation is going to be for the next 5 or 10 years. Stability is unsure. Well, stability is very, very important. We have to ensure that what is in place now, at least that is secure, that it will stay that way, perhaps improve the situation. The processors in Canada, perhaps dairy processors, could tell you a bit more detail, but what I can say is that we are results-based. We want to find solutions to practical issues. And it's important to have a solution that answers a problem. Thank you very much, Madame Gosselin. My next question is for Ms. Theodore. You spoke of some problems with immigration and TFW programs. Do you have any suggestions to make as to how these programs, the immigration regime could be modified or adapted? We've seen the problems we can run into during a pandemic.
You know, in our opinion at Maple Leaf Foods, the biggest problem in particular with the temporary foreign workers program is the complexity of the application process from start to finish, complexity and time commitment, right? Because as we were saying, we are dealing with acute shortages. And then the cost. You know, like we said, you know, at Maple Leaf Foods, we are looking for the most efficient way to attract long-term labor to our plants. That's what we want to do first. And then if we need to move to a temporary foreign worker program, for us, in order for it to make sense, right? The cost and the time factor needs to make sense. And what we have found is that for us, it does not. It takes way too long, and the cost for the company is too heavy.
Merci. Et puis au niveau.
Thank you. And as for the flexibility, regulatory flexibility, can you expand on that a little bit?
So I will try not to. But I will take, and I can't remember if it was Mr. Laycraft or Mr. Lowe's point that, you know, oftentimes with regulation, it's not the particular regulation, right? For us, what we find, it's the inflexibility, puis tu l'as bien dit, la souplesse qui manque in what we are required to do.
C'est vraiment
right?
l'interprétation.
Yeah, it's a matter of interpreting yes, absolutely.
On the process and less too focused right now on the process where it needs to be focused on the outcome and providing the company with the flexibility to get to a predetermined outcome that with the regulators we have agreed on, right? And so in 2018, if I may, there was a suggestion to form a code of a little bit of a code of conduct when you're talking about regulation between the regulator and the industry. And we think that that's a good idea because it puts in place certain like certain things that we are all going to agree to when we're talking about building regulation between us to ensure that it makes sense both for the regulator and for the company.
Thank you, Mrs. Theodore. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Madame Theodore.
Merci, Monsieur Leroux. And now, Mr. Blois, for up to 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Blois.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses who have provided some great testimony here this afternoon. I'm going to start with the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. You certainly, at your opening remarks, were talking about capacity in Eastern Canada, and specifically in my neck of the woods in Nova Scotia and the Maritime provinces specifically. Our livestock processing capability is largely at the provincial level, 100%. We heard from Margie Lamb from the Pork Council of Nova Scotia earlier in this study about some of the challenges they have. We do have Atlantic Beef in Prince Edward Island, a federally regulated slaughterhouse. But can you elaborate in terms of your membership in that area about the need to grow processing and what it could mean to driving that industry in our part of the country?
Yeah, Bob, maybe I'll step in on that one. There's kind of two parts. We're trying to give some risk management tools, first of all, available to producers in the maritime region. We've been funding the Eastern Price Index when trying to get price insurance available for them. Are you able to hear me?
I can. Yep. No, I can.
Great.
But
Okay.
Obviously, we're focused on processing, notwithstanding the fact that you need a feedstock to be able to drive some of that. And right now we're importing. So as I understand it, then perhaps Atlantic Beef, where they're still importing from Quebec, could be benefited from having more local feedstock. But we need to have the tools in place to drive producers to get us to that fuller capacity. Is that correct?
That's one piece of it. And then we did actually interview them on this Export Diversification Fund, and they are doing some expansion in the Atlantic Beef operation. There's more expansion they would look at if there was more matching money that was available. Again, it's back to risk tolerance as you move forward. And one thing that we don't talk about much, but it is always kind of behind the scenes on these smaller selling local operations, is rural internet.
Okay.
You know, those things are really important. It doesn't help when your front door goes down once or twice a day. When you're trying to sell something, you need a sound, reliable infrastructure there for those businesses to really operate efficiently.
We'll pass that off to Minister Monsef. Ms. Theodore, obviously Maple Leaf, as you mentioned, the largest agri-food processor in the country. You have reach across the country, but particularly in the maritime provinces, there has been some centralization of facilities. For example, some of the ones that existed in my riding in the Annapolis Valley have since centralized to other places. Can you speak to the evolution for Maple Leaf in terms of why those decisions were made? Probably, I assume, to get to a cost competitive level, but how can we work with industry to build capacity in the regions without hurting, I guess I would say, the economic case? Is there a middle ground there to keep that regional capacity without compromising you in an international marketplace?
You know, I mean, that is the $1 million question, right? I think that the answer is yes. Of course, there is that sweet spot somewhere. But I think that, you know, the difficulty in finding that sweet spot is really, you know, it goes back to the principles that we've all been talking about here. When we, as a company, are looking at either whether it's building a plant or maintaining a plant, and then looking at over the long term what the economic viability of that is, you know, for us, it's say we're talking about building a plant, right? For us, it's a combination of what is the cost, both in monetary, but in time to build it. So that goes into the regulation question, right? The regulation from the federal level right down to the municipal level. What is the risk tolerance, right? That we're going to, that we're comfortable with especially when we look at what the long-term viability is going to be for the sector. So I'll give you an example that's not a maritime example, but I think it's relevant here. We are making a significant investment in our in a London poultry plant, right? Significant investment, taking into consideration the importance of building a sustainable plant that's looking into the future. In so doing, we obviously took into account the landscape of the poultry industry, but what COVID-19 has demonstrated to us, and what makes us nervous, I'll be very frank, is that the way that our supply management system is set up for poultry right now makes us nervous. That investment that we made in that London poultry plant, and knowing what we know and how the system moved through COVID-19 for us, we face significant losses and significant pressure to the business that is troubling for us, right? And
I'm sorry, I have to intervene because I've only got 40 seconds and I wish I had more time.
Sure.
I want to go, and I guess the final point, if you have anything you could submit to the committee, we hear a lot about regulatory reform. It's music to my ears. I think it's important things government can do without spending that helps drive economic growth. Beyond the culture of trying to create that innovative culture within the regulatory framework, if you have any choke point areas, we'd love to hear them, I think, as a committee, if you could submit those. Finally, just to Ms. Gosselin and Mr. Chair, I know I probably only have about 20 seconds. You mentioned the importance of research. Can you speak about the research? For example, in my riding, it's the Kentville Research Station. In your area in Quebec, is it the Agri-Food and Agriculture Canada research stations that are helping drive some of that innovation? Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. And perhaps, as you suggest, Mr. Blois, if there's anything that you want to submit to the committee, by all means, send it to the chair. Et maintenant, M. Perron, pour 6 minutes. Allez-y, M. Perron.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Écoutez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With Ms. Theodore, I didn't quite. You spoke of a shortage of labor, skilled labor. We were told that perhaps, given the pandemic and everything else, we could allow 10% should be increased to 20% in 30 seconds. Well, yes, it's been working, in fact. We could contain more, Ms. Avanu.
Actual research to understand where our actual gaps are, so we're not just going from 20 to 30% haphazardly, right? So yes, I think that it's good. Yes, that I think that we can do more, but we really need to dig in and take the time to understand where our gaps are in order to really think about what the solutions are. And I don't think that we've done that adequately to date.
OK. Mais vous appuyez quand même.
But you support the increase from 10% to 20%.
On its face, yes.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Earlier, you also said that you were losing quite a bit of money in the poultry sector. There were certain uncertainties. Is that due to recent free trade agreements? Could you tell us more about that, please?
I'll try and be brief, but it's complicated. But in bref, the issue is that when we are allocating. When we do our allocations for the poultry sector, right? What happens is that the processors take on all of the risk, but have none of the power in the allocation, right? And what we saw during COVID-19 is that, first of all, there was at the beginning, we were able to fix that allocation and take a regional approach so that it kind of measured out okay. But as we got further into COVID-19, there was an unwillingness for us to do that again and again, right? And so this last allocation, what we saw is that it was really only Ontario, through the goodness of their heart, that decided to work with us to make the allocation such that we took into account the reduced need for poultry and adjusted the allocation appropriately.
Est-ce que
the compensation programs, could they help you breathe a bit?
Issues, but absolutely, we await very patiently to hear about what processors are going to be getting. Happy that that producers got their compensation, and we wait very patiently to hear about the compensation for processors.
Parfait, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Ms. Gosselin, earlier you said that uncertainties related to free trade agreements, you spoke about them, but I'm happy to hear you say that you're in research and development to develop products, that you're still exporting, but there's a financial risk. And if you're setting up a project for a 5-year period, will there still be a market for this project? So the uncertainties linked to free trade agreements, are they blocking innovation at this point? That's an excellent question. I can ask the question differently. If you were told that in the future there would be no more concessions, even though there were some, would that help? Yes, that would help. Because there's a certain discomfort at the moment. Right now, we are just at the beginning of these free trade agreements. I don't think that we fully have felt the effects of free trade agreements signed over the last few years, and that's what the dairy industry is preparing for, because we know that market share will be restricted, as will be export capacity. This is already very complex. This issue is complex. I think that the message from the private sector is clear. We cannot accept further concessions because that would create an environment that is not favorable to doing business. I would like to go back to your students. Many stakeholders testified that we need to promote in order to recruit in the agri-food sector. Could your students maybe promote this sector? I wonder what your thoughts are on that. It's very difficult to recruit at every level, but when we speak of natural foods or the foodie aspect, that's very interesting for young people. Well-being of the animals, the environment. These research themes exist at Novalet. And yes, young people have quite a stereotypical view of the agri-food sector, but when we say, the message we communicate is that we are an industry that wants to reduce its carbon footprint, improve animal well-being, well, that actually provides quite a bit of success for us. Thank you, Monsieur Perron. Thank you, Madame Gosselin.
Go ahead, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Theodore, I think in a previous question you had from my colleague, Mr. Epp, he was asking you about the grocery code of conduct. Is there anything you wanted to add on that from Maple Leaf Foods' perspective?
Sorry, I almost got through the whole thing without, on the code, listen, what I will say is this. I think that this idea of, or the importance of promoting and supporting good faith dealings, responsible commercial conduct, does Maple Leaf Foods think that those are that is a good idea? 100%. And what I would say is, for us as an industry player, it is 100% clear from speaking, especially with the smaller parties, that it is a struggle. The margins just aren't there, right? The margins aren't there to give up to 6% randomly at any given time when requested to grocers, and is that an issue longer term, especially when we're talking about innovation, when we're talking about growing the sector, when we're talking about getting new players, getting smaller players involved? We have to connect the dots. Absolutely. Do I think, speaking on behalf of Maple Leaf Foods, that it is going to be easy to get all provinces and territories across the country to come up with a code of conduct that is going to work for everybody, which is what would be needed in order for it to really be effective, if we're going to be honest with ourselves? I think that might be difficult. So, we do have to, at the end of the day, figure out how we are going to work together, all parties, all stakeholders, to make sure that we are, in our dealings with each other, moving towards the greater good of the sector, right? Not to sound too Pollyanna about it, but I think that that's actually what it's going to come down to. Whether that's a code of conduct or whether that's something else, we can talk about that ad nauseum. But to me, that's really the core question, right?
Great. Okay, thank you so much. And Madame Gosselin from Novalet, you've certainly had a lot of questions, but is there anything you wanted to expand upon in maybe the 3 minutes I have left that you wanted our committee to really focus on? Anything you felt you may have been cut off by a previous question round or anything like that?
Merci beaucoup. Quelle opportunité.
Thank you so much. What an opportunity. I think that you understood that Novalet allows producers and processors to work together. That's one of our strengths. And we're very happy that people know us in Quebec, but they also know us on the national level, because Novalet really is a voice to solve issues. We work with a continuum from producing all the way to processing, and that's what we wanted to put forward. This approach, Novalet's approach, is a good one. Often producers and processors can work together on common issues. Once again, I want to say that innovation is essential and central to the sector, the food processing sector, and so we really need to continue investing in that. And we see results thanks to data, knowledge, and science that we can give to businesses so that they take enlightened decisions. So we didn't really talk about animal well-being, but we worked extensively on this topic, and we want to continue to have an open dialogue that is based on fact and not perceptions. And producers and processors, we want them to agree to work together for animal well-being, namely, among other things. But research is essential to the economy, and I think that research can offer solutions for the private sector and the processing sector.
I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Merci, Madame Gosselin.
Thank you, Madame Gosselin.
The question round, but if the committee will indulge me, I will use my chair privilege to ask a question. And my question would go to Ms. Theodore. And I may not like the answer, but I think it's a question that has to be asked. Why is it that Maple Leaf, a Canadian icon with the Maple Leaf logo, would choose Shelbyville, Indiana for a $310 million protein plant when we have, of course, the supply, the raw material here, quality? And why is it that you chose that, and why is it that we're not getting the private sector investment into these plants? So we'll hear your answer. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Finnegan, for the question. And my response was, in my opening remarks, right? And I will preface it by saying it is complicated, right? It's not ever one thing. But surely what I said in my opening remarks about the cumulative impact and the cumulative burden of regulation, both from a cost perspective, but also from a time perspective, and also from a predictability perspective, right? All of us around this virtual table understand business and understand that the number one thing for business is predictability and cost efficiency, right? I mean, that really is what it's about. And what I will say is that for all of its good, and there's lots of good, the not so good with our regulatory system is that it stymies investment. It creates barriers to predictability, barriers to innovation, and barriers to cost efficiency that oftentimes far outweigh the positive to health, and sometimes even stymie the health, environmental positives that we are trying to gain. And so, while I won't speak to the specifics with regard to a specific decision of putting one plant in X instead of Y, I do think that, we should look to these types of examples and study them carefully and be very serious about thinking through our regulatory framework going forward, especially when we're talking about recovery and especially when we're talking about scaling up our agriculture and agri-food sector going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Theodore. I didn't think I'd like the answer, but I think it's a question that's got to be asked, and it should be part of our plan to increase our processing sector. And so I thank you very much. And on that, I shall thank Canadian Cattlemen Association, Mr. Bob Lowe. Thank you so much for being here today with us. Mr. Dennis Laycraft, the same. Thank you for your presence and your comments. And Madame Gosselin, merci bien.
Thank you to Madame Gosselin. Thank you for being here today.
Of course, Miss Theodore, thanks so much for being here today. So that concludes our committee work today, and we shall see you all on Thursday. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Merci.